We move right along here in chapter 20, section 3, part 2, attempts to maintain the peace. This is it. This is the end of the chapter. So let's just jump in here and try to finish up. And we're going to start with this guy, Charles Dawes, a banker, right? A big time banker. So we know, flashing red light, we got a problem here. But what has happened during World War I? Keep in mind that Europe is in big debt. Countries like France and Great Britain are in debt to the United States because the United States had been loaning them money, providing them weapons and whatnot. And now the war is over. France and Britain got to pay. Germany, of course, has been forced to sign the war guilt clause, meaning they admit they're at fault, even though this is absurd. Remember the Archduke Ferdinand in Serbia and all that stuff going on? But Germany takes blame, and they're going to be hit with reparations, big-time payments. And, of course, Germany has to pay France, and Great Britain for all the damage. But Germany has no money. So Charles Dawes' big, brilliant plan here, the United States will loan money to Germany, and therefore Germany can pay its debts to Great Britain and France, and Belgium, whatever. And then France and Great Britain can pay the debts they owe back to the United States. So it's a big circle of money. And of course, the U.S., or the bankers, I should say, are collecting interest all the way around. A big money scam. And we'll see in a few short years the Nye Committee, led by Gerald Nye, Senator Nye, U.S. Senator. And he and his committee will conclude that World War I was nothing but a big fat money grab orchestrated by weapons manufacturers and bankers, right? Funding both sides of the war, creating weapons for both sides of the war, and making a bunch of money in the process. Now, that is a U.S. Senator, but we won't read about that too much. They got to bury that. Anyway, that's the Dawes plan. What else we got going on? Real quick, the Locarno Pact, dealing with these three countries, and they all share a border, right? A German border. And what we're saying here is that at the end of the war, we decide what's going to be done here, and then we will make these borders permanent, hoping to avoid future hostilities. Germany, of course, losing a bunch of land in the process, but that will obviously come back up because a guy named Adolf Hitler is going to be somewhat angry with this whole Treaty of Versailles, as will basically all of the German-speaking world. All right, now, another attempt at peace is the Washington Naval Conference, okay? So this is dealing with the Navy, and we want to reduce the number of ships that each country has. Now, I put this quote in here from the textbook: men who refuse to believe that wars result from the natural sinfulness of man will sometimes conclude that wars are caused by weapons. This is an excellent sentence for creating a discussion. It's like saying if we outlaw guns, will we stop having gun violence? It makes sense. If we get rid of weapons, then we can't have a war. But it's somewhat hypocritical or ridiculous, actually, because the whole point is that man is sinful, right? So if we say we're going to get rid of weapons or guns or whatever, well, because of man's sinful nature, why wouldn't he lie about that? Clearly, if man is willing to go to war and commit murder, well, sure, he'd be willing to tell a little lie from time to time. And again, here we have really blaming mankind for war, when, a war is fought because a government, politicians, prime ministers, presidents, kings, czars, whatever, they make the decision to go to war, okay? The people don't go to war. They follow those orders, all right? But anyway, I'm sorry. Back to the naval conference here. And we're just going to reduce, the number of warships. We'll try to keep it the same for the leading powers so that neither power can get an advantage over the other one. Ironically, I think the U.S. has allowed like 5 battleships, Britain 5, and Japan 3. So Japan is like, wait a minute, how is this fair? This kind of Japan getting the short end of the stick. And of course, we'll see Japan joining with the Axis powers in World War II. They're being slighted here at the Treaty of Versailles and all the stuff coming out. But anyway, That's the Washington Naval Conference here. It's all about disarmament, right? Getting rid of weapons. These are test questions, people. Test question, disarmament, okay? The Kellogg Briand Pact or the Briand Pact. We got to outlaw war, right? Well, that's a great idea. Why didn't we think of that before? We'll just outlaw war, and then it'll never happen again, right? 1928. 10 years later, 11 years later, an even bigger war breaks out. So one has to wonder about all these peace ideas. How did they end up leading to an even bigger war? And finally, the League of Nations. This is the organization created. It's Wilson's idea. Woodrow Wilson, President Wilson of the United States. We'll have this organization whereby all the countries can sort of get together, the representatives, meet and talk things out. We'll discuss differences rather than fight over them. And a bunch of countries join, they join in, right? They join, great idea, let's join. And in the United States, though Wilson proposes it, it still has to be ratified by the Senate. And the Senate, interestingly enough, rejects it. They turn it down. So the United States doesn't even join the league that it created. And why? Why would that be? Well, you might argue that because he's a Democrat and all those guys in the Senate, most of them are Republican. They're just playing politics. Could be true. Others might argue that those members of the Senate realize that we don't want to be involved in these kinds of things. Okay, these things are always counterproductive. They're basically hijacked from the start. A few countries, get control kind of and sway everyone in there. And they just decide, hey, we don't want to be part of any of that nonsense. We want to go back to our country within our own borders and do our own thing. And, you guys do whatever you want. Europe, your history of war. No, thank you. Of course, the United States has a long history of war as well. So let's not kid ourselves. So anyway, that'll conclude it all. But let's look at the essay real quick. What are the causes of World War I? Keep in mind, the Archduke Ferdinand is assassinated, right, in Sarajevo, right around here. All right, so what happens, right? Well, Austria-Hungary will then invade Serbia. Check. And then Russia will have to come to the defense of Serbia. Check. And then Germany will have to come to the defense of Austria-Hungary. And then they realize that they're going to be at war with France and Russia. So with the Schlieffen Plan, they invade France with the hopes of sacking Paris in 6 weeks. And then they can turn around and invade Russia before Russia has completed mobilizing. So Germany invades Belgium to get into France. And of course, that triggers the United Kingdom. Now, Great Britain is in the war. They have a treaty with Belgium. And that pretty much, gets all the countries involved. And then at the other one, why did the U.S. get involved? Well, we had the sinking of the Lusitania, causing public outrage. A warship disguised as a passenger liner. We had the Zimmerman Note, Germany's alleged note to Mexico, pledging Mexico, saying, hey, if you join us, if the United States gets into the war, this is what Germany's saying to Mexico. If the United States joins, gets involved, helps Britain, we would like you, Mexico, to help us, Germany. And if we win, we'll give you back the Mexican cession. Arizona, New Mexico, California, Nevada, Utah, all that land taken, right after the Mexican-American War. Okay, so of course now public outrage is fever pitched, right? And then we have the unrestricted submarine warfare. Any ship that is thought to be bringing weapons to Great Britain will be sunk by the German U-boats that are patrolling the area. All right, that'll conclude Chapter 20. Test on Friday.